Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from chapter 13, right? Chapter 13 of the 10th canto. Name of the chapter is The Stealing of the Boys and Calves by Brahma. We're reading texts 1 and 2. So I'll just read the text by myself, and then we can hopefully jump into a discussion together. So text 1, Shishuka Vacha, Sadhu Prishtam Mahabhaga, Tvaya Bhagavatottama, Yannutana Yashishaya, Shrinvanapi Katham Muhu. The translation and purport by His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada Vijay. Srila Sukadev Goswami said, O best of devotees, most fortunate Parikshit, you have inquired very nicely, for although constantly hearing the pastimes of the Lord, you are perceiving His activities to be newer and newer. Purport. Unless one is very advanced in Krishna consciousness, one cannot stick to hearing the pastimes of the Lord constantly. Nityam Nava Navaya Manam. Even though advanced devotees hear continually about the Lord for years, they still feel that these topics are coming to them as newer and fresher. Therefore, such devotees cannot give up the hearing of the pastimes of Lord Krishna. Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. The word Santaha is used to refer to persons who have developed love for Krishna. Yam Shamasundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Brahma Samhita 5.38. Parikshit Maharaj, therefore, is addressed as Bhagavatottama, the best of devotees, because unless one is very much elevated in devotional service, one cannot feel ecstasy from hearing more and more and appreciate the topics as ever fresher and newer. In text 2. Let's see what the meter for this is. Satam ayam sarabhyatam nisargo yadar tavani shruti chetasamapi pratikshanam navyavadachutasya yat striya vitanam ivasadu varta. Translation. Paramhamsas, devotees who have accepted the essence of life, are attached to Krishna in the core of their hearts, and He is the aim of their lives. It is their nature to talk only of Krishna at every moment, as if such topics were newer and newer. They are attached to such topics just as materialists are attached to the topics of women and sex. Purport. The word Sarabratam means Paramahamsas. The Hamsa, or swan, accepts milk from a mixture of milk and water and rejects the water. Similarly, the nature of persons who have taken to spiritual life and Krishna consciousness, understanding Krishna to be the life and soul of everyone, is that they cannot give up Krishna Katha or topics about Krishna at any moment. Such Paramahamsas always see Krishna within the core of the heart. Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. Kama, desires, Krodha, anger, and Bhaya, fear, are always present in the material world. But in the spiritual or transcendental world, one can use them for Krishna. Kamam Krishna Samarpane. The The desire of the Paramahamsas, therefore, is to act always for Krishna. Krodam bhakta dveshi jane. They use anger against the non-devotees and transform bhaya or fear into fear of being deviated from Krishna consciousness. In this way, the life of a Paramahamsa devotee is used entirely for Krishna. Just as the life of a person attached to the material world is used simply for women and money. What is day for the materialistic person is night for the spiritualist. What is very sweet for the materialist, namely women and money, is regarded as poison by the spiritualist. Sandarshanam vishayinam atha yoshitam cha ha hanta hanta visha bhakshanato pisadhu. This is the instruction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. For the Paramahamsa, Krishna is everything, but for the materialist, women and money are everything. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Chalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruvai Namaha. So, welcome for today's discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 13. This is Brahma stealing the cows. So, it looks like we have some newer members. What's your name, sir?
John.
John. And you are regular?
Alan.
So welcome. So this is our daily, I don't know if this is your first time or you've been here before? A couple of times. So this is like our transcendental sitcom, just like in a TV show, you're like hooked on to what happens in the next episode of such and such TV show on Netflix or whatever channels. So this is our live sitcom. Every morning we tune in to see what happens in the next episode. So we're discussing Srimad Bhagavatam, which are nice spiritual stories. And it allows us to completely immerse our consciousness in spiritual topics. So this chapter is stealing of this Lord Brahma who steals Krishna. You know about Krishna, right? So Krishna is the supreme divine. You can call Krishna by many names. One of the names is Krishna. So one of his associates, so to speak, Brahma, steals his cows and calves. So we are in that section of Bhagavatam where before this, I don't know what happened in the previous few episodes of our Bhagavatam classes, but the verses leading up to this verse is that there is this python demon, Aghasura, who's trying to sort of kill Krishna and his little friends. And then Krishna kills the Aghasura demon. And then Parikshit Maharaj is explaining that Krishna was 5 years old when this happened. And then a year later, his friends go and report back to their parents saying this such a wonderful incident happened, as if it just recently happened. So Sukadev Goswami just says that and then he moves on to other glorification of Krishna. So Sukadev intentionally doesn't explain it. Why is that? Why after a year, the boys, why did they wait for a year? So it's interesting that he just says that and just moves on. So of course, a good speaker, he knows how to arouse the curiosity of the listener to see if they're going to catch that or not. So Sukadev Goswami just drops that and then moves on to see if Parikshit, who's the hearer of Bhagavatam. And sure enough, Parikshit is such a wonderful listener. He's perfected one of the 9 processes. He's perfected the Shravanam, the hearing aspect. So Parikshit catches that point and he asked Sukadev Goswami, the speaker, like, wait, what's up with that? Why did the cowherd boys wait for a year to report that incident? So like this, we see throughout Bhagavatam, Parikshit is like, he's attentive. He's a perfect example of what a good listener should be. So he's asking questions periodically. So he's not overdoing it. He's not asking too many. Sometimes you ask too many questions and it disrupts the flow of the speaker. So you ask too many questions, or on the other extreme, you don't ask any questions at all. You're just spaced out and the speaker doesn't know if the audience is engaged or not. So Parikshit is right in the middle. Every now and then he'll ask a question or two. And one example is at the end of 5th canto of, anyway, we won't go into that example of how Parikshit, every now and then he asks a wonderful question to just keep this it's like a discussion between Sukadev Goswami and Parikshit. So he's keeping it really exciting by regularly asking questions that further enhance the discussion. So that's how questions should be asked, which further sort of churn the nectar of the discussion. So questions are not so much necessarily meant to be put forward as from a challenging perspective, or just out of sheer mental curiosity, just to satisfy that mental itch, but more like to sort of churn the topics. So this way we see that Shukadeva Goswami just drops that and then moves on. But the main reason why he does that, anybody knows why he doesn't get into that? He just drops that line saying, okay, after a year they reported, but he doesn't get into it. Why does he not get into it? So yes, what's your name? Manan. Yeah. Yes. Huh? Yeah, that's one way of putting it is he wants to explain the Brahma Vimohan Leela. That's a nice segue into that pastime. But then the end of the previous chapter 12, it's explained that Shukadeva Goswami gets into trance, spiritual ecstasy. In other words, in colloquial language, he loses it. So he goes into spiritual ecstasy, and then the acharyas explain that Narada, Vyasa, and other spiritual personalities, they have to revive him back, because Parikshit only has 7 days. He cannot just go into trance and like a day passes by. So they start chanting the holy names, and Shukadeva Goswami wakes up from his spiritual ecstasy, and again he continues. So Shukadeva Goswami, for many reasons like this, we see he just drops that line and then he doesn't get into it. And then Parikshit is such a great listener, and then he's like, wait, can I ask that, can you sort of dig that? Can we dive in deeper into how do you explain that span of a year, that lapse between that incident and the reporting of that incident? So this way, so that gives that opportunity for Shukadeva Goswami to segue into the Brahma Vimohan Leela. So what that Leela is, or to explain how do you explain that lapse of a year? For example, like last week we had Janvi Harrison concert, right? The Kirtan Bhakti concert. And imagine a year after now, suddenly people start discussing about that event. Like, oh, did you go to that concert? Wasn't that amazing? Everybody's discussing and you're listening and like, okay, that was great, but why are you discussing this after a year? So something like that, basically. So Parikshit is wondering, why are they discussing about this a year after that incident happened? So the story, like again, a quick summary of this chapter 13 is, after Agasura incident happened, the killing of the demon, all the cowherd boys, then they go to have lunch. They're sitting together, they're having lunch. And they're, as usual, when they're having lunch, they're sharing their meal with each other. And Brahma, who's passing by, he's witnessing Krishna's pastimes with the cowherd boys. And a doubt develops in his mind that Krishna is actually, at this point, he is 5 years old. And here is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's 5-year-old boy. And you're telling me like God is like a 5-year-old boy. And not only that, as he's eating with his friends, they're sharing their lunch with each other. And Krishna sometimes grabs certain foodstuffs with his left hand, and in Vedic culture, left hand is used for some not so clean activities or bathroom activities, and right hand is used for eating. So he's eating with his left hand, and all the food is like dripping, and sometimes he licks like this, and he's grabbing food with both hands. And sometimes the cowherd boys steal from each other's lunch boxes. Like one of the cowherd boy would steal a rasgulla and pop. When Krishna's not, he's like pointing another direction and steal a rasgulla and pop in his mouth. And they would tease Krishna like, I got your, rasgulla. And then Krishna, and as they have it in your mouth like this, and then Krishna would pop their mouth like this, and the rasgulla would come flying out and then come into Krishna's mouth, and Krishna would be like, ha ha ha. So Brahma is witnessing all this, like, what's going on? This is God. He's just popping someone's mouth. And imagine you see the president of America behind the scenes. He's doing all of these things with his cabinet ministers. They're playing like the Three Stooges. They're poking each other's eyes, or like rock paper scissors. Like, how do we come up to a big decision? Okay, how about this? Rock paper scissors. You might develop a doubt. Like, okay, so this is our president. So Brahma develops this doubt. Like, what's going on? So he thinks, okay, let's test God. Let's see what this God is. Let's see if he's truly God or not. So to play a prank, as Krishna's cows wander away, Krishna tells the cowherd boys, okay, don't worry, I'll get them back. You guys continue with your lunch. And as Krishna is going to fetch the cows, Brahma then goes, as you know the story, Brahma then steals all the cowherd boys and then hides them away and then puts them to sleep and puts them in a cave. And he thinks that when Krishna will come back, ha ha ha, he'll be really, bewildered. Where are my friends? Where is, And then as Krishna is going to search for the cowherd boys, then he goes steals the calves and he'll hide, and Krishna will be like bewildered, like boo-hoo, where are my friends? And then we'll know who's God. But then Krishna, already being a super soul, he resides in every one of our hearts. He knows already what Brahma is up to, all the mischief. So Krishna expands himself into all of those all the cowherd boys, exactly replicating all those cowherd boys. And then Brahma hides the cowherd boys, goes to his spiritual, like his heavenly planet, Brahmaloka. And then he comes back. So it's said that time operates differently in different realms. Depending on our consciousness, time operates either slower or faster. For example, if you see insects and other living beings, their consciousness is a little smaller. So time scale for them is different. Some insects, for them, their whole lifespan is a day. They're born in our day in the morning, and then by our night, they're dead. So their lifespan is like our 100 years is for them one day. So time operates differently as per our consciousness. So Brahma goes to this not spiritual world, like heavenly planets, Brahmaloka. And then he comes back. For him, it's like just like few seconds or like few minutes. But in the earthly realm, that's like 1 year. So anyway, not to go too much into this pastime, because this will be explained in the later episodes of our Srimad Bhagavatam show. So as Brahma comes back, it's been a year. And then anyway, then all the cowherd boys that were held captive, they're now sort of released, and they go back and they describe to their parents, like, what a wonderful. So the cowherd boys were asleep. So they wake up after a year and then they go back and report that this killing. So that's why a whole year passes by. So Parikshit Maharaj catches this point. And then he explains about, Sukadev Goswami explains about this pastime. So in today's two verses, it's explained that when Parikshit asked this question, Sukadev Goswami, the speaker, is really thrilled and elated. He's so happy that he's asking such wonderful questions, so he's really thrilled. And Sukadev Goswami is saying that, oh, best of the devotees, most fortunate, you've inquired so nicely. For constant hearing of the pastimes of the Lord, you're perceiving his activities to be newer and newer. So Sukadev Goswami is saying that these activities for you are like ever fresh. Why is that? Because he's been hearing for 7 days. So not like you've been hearing and you're like, okay, you become saturated. Okay, how much can I listen? Like our Bhagavatam classes used to be an hour. And then I got shrink to 45 minutes, because in Kali Yuga, how much can you listen? So that's why you have to keep people engaged, because if you let people speak, they can sort of hear nicely. If not, 10 minutes you speak and people start spacing out, right? At least speaking for myself, I cannot hear for more than 10 minutes. So that's why you have to keep people engaged. So here we see that Parikshit Maharaj is hearing for 7 days, and Sukadev Goswami is saying, instead of being saturated, you're asking such a nice question. This shows that these pastimes, you're listening as if this is the first day of our discussion. So Sukadev Goswami is really thrilled that these pastimes are newer and newer for you. And then he says that, he goes on to say, the next verse, you might have noticed something lingering in your mind of the next verse, where the speaker says that sometimes pure devotees accept these topics as like the essence of life. And that's why they're so hooked onto it. They can go on listening and listening. And just like he gives an example. And you might be wondering, what a strange example to give. He says that just like people who are not into spiritual life are attached to topics of women and sex. So of course, your women means the object of your sexual attraction. For men it's women, for women it's men, or whatever your orientation is. So just like we are always hooked on to the object of our sexual attraction, and sex life is said that in material realm, that's like the pinnacle of all enjoyment. And people who are into such activities, such enjoyments, they'll find newer and newer ways to enjoy either sex life or addictions or whatever that is. You'll find newer and newer ways. And for them, it's always thrilling. Like you'll never see someone saying, I'm bored of sex. Like outside of spiritual communities, will you hear anybody saying, cocaine is overrated? I'm so over it, boring. I'm bored of sex. You'll never hear that. So just like people who are like, they find newer and newer pleasures in these activities, Shukadev was saying, just like that, you are finding newer and newer pleasures in these pastimes. You're asking such wonderful questions. And these questions show how you are you're paying careful attention, and these topics are becoming newer and newer for you. But then the question is like, yeah, that's great for Shukadev Goswami, but what about us? How can we listen with newer and newer rapture, and how can these spiritual topics become really like we hear these pastimes regularly? How can we hear in such a way that it feels as if this is the first time you're hearing these pastimes? So Bhagavatam goes on to explain. So to explain the process of hearing, how the process of hearing spiritual topics is so powerful, and like under the hood, how does this process of hearing work? How does this, we all know hearing is purifying. How does this process of purifying work? So Bhagavatam says that the famous verse, as you guys might all know, Srinmatam Sokatha Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, Hridayantasto hi abhadrani, Vidunoti Suhratam Satam. That those who have developed this urge to hear, Krishna is dwelling in each and every one of our hearts. So Krishna notices that, okay, you guys have developed this urge to hear. So Krishna says, okay, since you have this desire to hear, let me further facilitate this hearing desire. So what is the one obstacle in the process of hearing is all the contamination and garbage in our heart. That acts as an obstacle to hearing. So Krishna, being residing in our heart, he takes a broom and starts sweeping our heart. And he says, since you have developed this urge, so then he starts cleaning the heart. Hridayantastohi, one who is situated in the heart. Vidunoti suratam satam, that he starts cleaning the heart. And by this process, when we hear, Krishna starts cleaning our heart. And by this process, we even become more inclined to hearing. And when we hear, the next natural consequence is nashta prarishu abhadrishu nityam bhagavati sevaya, right? Bhagavati uttamashloki bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. That when by regular hearing of these spiritual topics, everything that is inauspicious in our life, all of our anxieties, everything goes away by regular hearing, attendance of Srimad Bhagavatam and serving. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So this verse doesn't say Nityam Bhagavan Sevaya, like constantly serving the Lord. It says serving the Bhagavatas, either the devotees or serving the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the best way to hear Srimad Bhagavatam is attentively hearing. So constantly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, everything that is inauspicious in our life is vanquished. And like this, we see that regularly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, we develop a taste for Srimad Bhagavatam. And by this taste, one can constantly hear these pastimes as if they're like newer and newer, just like Shukadev Goswami is telling Parikshit. It feels like ever fresh. But there's another aspect of this hearing process. What is that element that makes this process even more relishable? Any guesses? What is that one element? What makes this process even more fresh?
Questions?
Huh?
Questions?
Questions, yes, that's definitely questions. And besides questions,
Eagerness for somebody to hear.
huh?
Somebody's eager to hear.
Somebody's eager to hear. Wonderful. Yeah, questions. Someone who's enthusiasm, eagerness, devotion.
The excitation of devotees.
Yes, Bhima Prabhu, can you say that again? You nailed it. Can you say that again, please?
To hear in the association of other devotees.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's the point that I was driving at. Is satam prasango mama virya samido bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kataha. That Krishna says that in the association of devotees, when we hear in the association of devotees, satam prasango mama virya samido, all my Krishna is saying, my wonderful activities, when you hear, what happens in that association of devotees, when we hear in such an association of devotees, then such discussion becomes bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kata. Such discussions become like a nectar for the heart and the ear. Hrit karna rasayana kata. Rasayana is like nectar, life-giving nectar. Rasayana katha. So these topics become like life-giving nectar for the heart and the ear. And then tad joshna apavarga vartmani shraddha rati bhakti anukramishati. That by such hearing in association of devotees, then our spiritual advancement becomes really rapid. So it's the association of devotee that makes it really exciting. It makes it really exciting when we hear in association of other devotees. And these pastimes we might hear again and again. Like there's so many pastimes we've heard, but still each time we hear it's exciting. Like one of the pastimes for me is Lord Chaitanya meeting Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Every time I hear this from a speaker, it's always exciting, like how sometimes Bhakti Charu Swami explains it or Radhana Swami explains it. It's always exciting when we hear these pastimes. You're waiting, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was heard for 7 days and Sarvabhauma is asking, okay, have you understood anything? And you're waiting, okay, what's going to happen next? How is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu going to respond? Anyway, there are many such pastimes where when we hear, what happens is these pastimes are drenched by the rasa of the heart of the devotee. And that's why it makes it so nectarian. When we hear, each devotee explains as per their own rasa, as per their own exchange, their devotional exchange with the Supreme Lord. So the same pastime takes on different forms, different flavors. That's why it's so ecstatic to hear these pastimes each and every time, even if you've heard this many, many times before. And that's why Shukadev Goswami is encouraging, in the first canto, he's saying, Nigama Kalpatoru Galitam Phalam, Sukamukad Amrita Drava Samyutam. So he's saying that, how does that verse go? Sukamukad Amrita Drava Samyutam. Pibata Bhagavata, thank you. Pibata Bhagavata Rasamalyam, Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavuka. That he's saying, oh thoughtful men, oh wonderful devotees, all the devotees assembled here, Muhuraho Rasiko, all the Rasika Vaishnavas, hear and relish these wonderful pastimes of the Lord, Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is the mature fruit, Nigama Kalpataru. So this Vedic canon, all the Vedic scriptures are referred to as Kalpataru, desired tree. And desired tree meaning that tree which can fulfill all of your desires. So this Vedic scriptures can give you many things. If you're looking for karma kanda activities, it'll give you that. Karma kanda means material enjoyment. If you're looking for material enjoyment, the Vedic scriptures can give you that. If you're looking for just spiritual pursuit of spiritual knowledge for the sake of spiritual knowledge, Jnana Marga will give you that. So Nigama Kalpatoro, this is like the Kalpatoro, desired tree. But then of this desired tree, this Bhagavatam is a mature fruit. Nigama Kalpatoro Galitam Phalam. Galitam means like a ripe mango, Galitam Phalam. Like one of that, sometimes you see like a green mango, it's not really palatable, it's like sour. But you see that reddish yellow mango, which is like ripe, inviting you to eat. Of course, if it's offered. So it's like a ripe mango, like Galitam Phalam. So Sukadev Goswami is saying this Bhagavatam is like the ripe fruit of that Vedic canon. Vedic literatures give you many things, but of those things, this Bhagavatam is the topmost. And he's saying not only that, Sukamukad Amrita Drava Samyutam. Since this has been spoken from the lips of Sukadev Goswami, this Bhagavatam is further dipped and drenched in the rasa of the heart of Sukadev Goswami. So Sukamukad Amrita Drava. So Amrita is nectar and Drava is like pulp. So he's saying this, imagine that mango, which is like all pulp. Amrita Drava Samyutam. And Samyutam means it's perfect. I'll end in 2 minutes, Adi Prabhu. So and then we can open up for discussions. So Amrita Drava Samyutam. Samyutam means it's perfect. So imagine a mango which has no skin and no seed. So sometimes mango itself is such a great fruit, but we have to peel that mango, and then we can only eat till we reach that seed, and then the skin of that seed or the fiber starts getting stuck in our teeth. But imagine a mango which is all pulp, drava, amyuta drava samyutam. So that perfect mango, Srimad Bhagavatam is like that perfect mango, it's all pulp. So how do we relish this Bhagavatam? How do we relish this Srimad Bhagavatam? So this verse says, Pibata Bhagavata Rasamalyam. You don't just eat it, you drink it. You drink, it's all pulp. So you drink this Srimad Bhagavatam. But the best way to drink is by the years. You can go on drinking this nectarian stories of Srimad Bhagavatam. And by this process is ever fresh, ever new. And this nectar, you want to keep hearing more and more. And like this, at the end of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 12th canto, finally Shukadev Goswami, after describing all 12 cantos, he finally summarized all the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he says, what is that wonderful word? Tadeva ruchiram, Tadeva ramyam ruchinam navam, Tadeva. Anyway, there's a wonderful verse in the 12th canto, where Shukadev Goswami, while summarizing, he says that these glorification of the Supreme Lord, it is all attractive, all ever relishable, and ever new and ever fresh. It's always navam navam, tadeva ramyam ruchiram navam navam. It's ever fresh. And not only that, there's all of us are suffering in an ocean of misery. So that dries up this ocean of misery. So this nectarian discussions of Srimad Bhagavatam is always ever fresh. And one last point I'll wrap up with is, just like Bhima Prabhu was saying, the best way to hear this Srimad Bhagavatam is in the association of devotees. So just like when we chant the holy names, it's japa. But when we chant those holy names in association with others, it becomes Sankirtan. So kirtan means, kirti means glory, singing the glories of the Lord. So Bhagavatam is singing the glories of the Lord. When we hear in association of devotees, that's glorifying Krishna in association of other devotees. This is Sankirtan. When we come together and we hear together, that's Sankirtan. So in glorifying Sankirtan, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that the famous verse of Shikshasakam, Cheto Darpanam Marjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam, Shreya Kaira Chandrika Vitaranam, Vidyavadujinam, Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying that this chanting together, glorifying together, this unlocks that spiritual nectar, spiritual treasure. And this spiritual treasure is like Anandam Buddhi. It is the ocean of enjoyment. Ambudhi is the ocean. It's not just like a bucket or like a pond or a lake. It's an ocean of enjoyment. Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. And not only is it an ocean, it's increasing at every step. Vardhanam means to increase. Pratipadam, every step it is increasing. This ocean of enjoyment keeps increasing, increasing, increasing. Anandam Buddhi Vardhan Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadhanam. So it allows us to fully enjoy this nectar. What allows us to fully enjoy this nectar? Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. So this Shri Krishna Sankirtanam, collective glorification of Krishna, will allow us to enjoy this Anandam Buddhi, this ocean of enjoyment, ever increasing ocean, new word like we are discussing in this verse. Sukadev Goswami is saying, Parishit, O King Parishit, for you, these discussions of Bhagavatam is ever new, ever fresh. It's newer and newer. So like that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, this Sankirtan, it's Shreya Kaira Chandrika Vitaranam. It's like a full moon of good fortune. Imagine the moon is rising across different time zones. Wherever the moon rises, it's spreading good fortune. Japan is spreading good fortune. And then comes to Middle East, spreading good fortune. So that good fortune of the full moon is Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. So I'll end with one last point. Today is Diwali. So happy Diwali to every one of you. So may by this spiritual discussion, may by this discussion of Bhagavatam, may this light the lamp of spiritual knowledge in our heart. Just like in Diwali, we light the lamp. It signifies as dispelling darkness. When you turn on the lights, it makes your room bright. So in Diwali, we light lamps and it dispels darkness. So may by this discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam, may this light the lamp of spiritual knowledge in each and every one of our hearts. Hare Krishna, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. So we'll have some reflection. Yes, Alan.
First of all, I'll tell you, when you read like something like the Bhagavatam, the Bible, every time you read it, you get something new out of it. So you continually read it, you keep learning it. I go, oh, this is what this means. So it's always great. And other comments, as far as you say people never get tired like material, that's not exactly true. A lot of times when you get a lot into alcohol, sex, and drugs, at a certain point, you do get tired. You realize it's not, the more that you try to achieve happiness in the material world, the less happy you are.
Yeah.
And finally, I just wanted to say when my Bhima said about association, I started like laughing a little to myself because it reminds me, like as a teenager, your parents saying, well, don't hang out with these people, go with these other people. And the kids are resented that for telling me, but there's a lot of truth. Who you're going to be with doesn't make a difference. If you're with a crowd that smokes, you'll probably smoke. If you're with a crowd who drinks, you probably drink. So if you're a crowd who's into spirituality, it's much more likely that you'll get into it.
Yeah. Thank you. So just to summarize.
You let him speak, there's 20 other people that can hear him.
Yeah.
Those people couldn't hear him.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat that. So So wonderful comment by Alan. To summarize, he said that just like in Bible, when you read, it's ever fresh. So, and then he was saying that he doesn't think that people they cannot be tired. You meant to say that people can be tired of drugs and sex. I would like to meet someone who's tired of sex. If you know someone, please show me who's like, okay, I'm done with that. You know, maybe you might be tired of your partner, but show me someone who's like really like done. But maybe there's someone who exists.
It's not bringing them the satisfaction they thought. After a while, the same thing, it gets a little boring. Then they want to try something. Let me try some drugs or something else. So you can after a while, anything to obsess, you could get tired of.
Sure. Thank you. And any other comments? We have one from our online Ananda Manjari, and then we'll go to Evan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I want to come back to the point that you created about the connection between the time and consciousness. Because as you know, it creates this sense that species with smaller lifespan, you know, have a lower consciousness, and it just makes me worry that already judging that can make us fall into what we see in the material world, which is like, I don't know, kids killing ants or insects because they have lower consciousness, or they are just seen as smaller, so perhaps less significant. And of course, as devotees, we see every single jiva and every single living being as valuable to Krishna and as something or someone we can serve. And so how do we simultaneously connect with this truth that it's like, okay, there can be lower stages of consciousness that we are interacting with in our daily life or living with in the world that we share, and simultaneously still keep the respect and attitude of a servant towards them.
I see. So your question is, though entities with lower consciousness may have smaller span of life, how do we still be respectful towards them, right? Did I understand you correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
How do we?
And the example you give is sometimes children or people might kill insects just because they are, you know, they're insects. So as Vaishnavas, we treat every living entity with respect, you know, every living entity we treat with respect. And we hear the story of Mrigari, who used to kill animals mercilessly. But then after his spiritual transformation, when his guru came, Narad Muni was awkwardly hopping and not going forward to offer obeisances to his guru. So his guru was Narada Muni, who came with Angira. So Angira was asking, what's going on? Why isn't he offering you obeisances? You know, if a disciple sees his guru, he should offer. But Mrigari was trying to sort of avoid stepping on ants. That was his consciousness. He didn't even want to hurt an ant. So that's the process of hearing, is when we become so conscious, we treat every living entity as divine. Just because they may have a smaller span of life doesn't mean we disrespect them or cause harm to them. Did that touch upon your point, Ananda Manjari, before I hand over to?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thanks for giving class, Boo. It was wonderful as always. I just wanted to, I asked this question a few classes ago about like what is really meant by sadhu sangha. What is like, who is a sadhu? Is it like when we say association of devotees, do we mean any devotees? Like what type of devotee? Like it's a very personal thing. It's not just like not all sadhu sangha is equal. So can you touch upon like which is like the true sadhu sangha?
Beautiful question. So everyone Prabhu is asking, how do you define sadhu sangha? What does it mean, sadhu sangha? It could be like subjective. So Rupa Goswami talks about this in Nectar of Instructions. Krishna Yasya Giritam Manasadriyeta. He's saying, how should one deal with different devotees? You know, one who's chanting, one should mentally honor, respects. One is initiated, one should sort of, and then one who's a pure devotee, one should render service. So Rupa Goswami explains that to different categories, devotees, we behave accordingly. You know, if someone is, basically we use our discrimination and intelligence, And he says, one who's a pure devotee, you render service to that person and seek more association. And also in 11th canto, it's explained that the Madhyama Adhikari, or the advancing devotee, he knows accordingly how to deal with devotees. It said that Ishwareshu tad adineshu balisheshu dushyachucha prema maitri kripopeksha ya karoti sa madhyama. That the Madhyama Adhikari knows exactly how to deal with different kinds of people. Prema, I think I mentioned this in one of my previous classes, that prema maitri kripa upeksha, that for the pure Supreme Lord, he has love. Maitri, he has, for his peers, he has friendship. And then for the innocent, he's really merciful, as opposed to being envious. And upeksha, and those who are envious, he just respectfully avoids. Like going back to the point of Ananda Manjari, how does one deal with other living entities? One is respectfully avoiding. So sadhu sangha, what defines sadhu sangha? For me personally speaking, I would say the element of like-minded association is really important, because even among peers, there's different moods, there's different flavors, and we need to see how one can nourish one's own bhakti. So I personally would try to seek like-minded association, but there's a risk in that. One can become too cliquish or my group-centric, like this is my clan-centric attitude. So there's a danger in having the clan-centric attitude. So best is I try to serve everybody. That way I can expand myself, not to necessarily to my egocentric clan. But at the same time, when it comes to, like Rupa Goswami says, dadati patigranati guhyam akyati prachati, that guhyam achyati prachati, that inquiring confidentially and revealing confidentially, that's where I choose the like-minded association. And as far as service goes, I try not to discriminate, saying, okay, these are my group and others, whatever. So anyway, thank you, Prabhu. And Adi Purusha, Prabhu.
That's a very important question. And Prabhupada tells us, we get the quality of association we desire. Want first-class association, Krishna will provide that. And if we get second-class association, we'll become third-class. So we have to desire properly, and Krishna will reciprocate. And one related topic about hearing, it says, Dhammas Manasi Tapung, the second chapter of the first canto, it says that no matter what your occupation is, if it does not provoke an attraction to hearing the messages of us, then your work is useless labor. So when we're trying to go against the current of the material world, and we're trying to be devotees, we'll be thirsty to hear something that will keep inspiring us and help us keep going forward. But if we're not serving Krishna, we won't have that. We will not provoke an attraction to hearing the messages of Vasudeva. And if we're really, really struggling, really pushing the envelope of what our comfort zone is, then we'll say, I've got to go to class. I've got to hear this. And because otherwise we fall back into the dream.
Any other last points, questions? Yes, one. So from what I know, I don't think Parikshit. Yeah, so I'll repeat the question from one and two. Is that has he heard these pastimes before, or is this the first time he's hearing these pastimes, right? So from my understanding, I don't think Maharaj Parikshit has, at least this conversation between Shukadev Goswami, not that Parikshit Maharaj had met Shukadev Goswami in the past and they had heard, but it's hard for me to answer without speculating. So I'll just simply say that from my limited knowledge, I don't know if Maharaj Parikshit has heard this particular. He's in the Vedic times, of course, you grew up in the Vedic culture, and he's the grandson of Arjuna. His father was Abhimanyu. So he comes from a rich legacy. So I'm sure he might have heard these pastimes before, but I can't necessarily substantiate with some Shastra. Any other comments, points, last minute, anything you want to add, either from our online audience?
Krishnadaya Prabhu knows everything. Maybe he knows if
Yes.
Parikshit heard before.
Our Pujari, our Bhakti Center Pujari.
Not sure. I don't know. But Parikshit played, I don't know.
Just a quick point, Krishnadev. Something just popped in my head. So you might wonder then why is he saying this? These pastimes are appearing newer and newer to you, right? Since is this the first time he's hearing? So the way I understood it is Sukadev Parikshit Maharaj has been listening, but still he's hearing with such relish that this is the first time he's starting to listen. Not like, because this is probably the 5th day of Srimad Bhagavatam, of the 7 days, and he's listening with rapture as if it's just started. It's like a new, fresh discussion, not like, okay, 5 days are over, I'm a little saturated now, can I have some water? So that's my speculation. So Krishna there, Prabhu, yes.
Some reference comes, he played with dolls of Krishna. Is it with Parikshit Maharaj? When he was, it comes, even in the childhood, he was playing with Krishna's dolls. I don't know whether
Krishna there, Prabhu saying, even with childhood, he was playing with Krishna's doll. I haven't heard that, to be honest. I have.
It says in the Bhagavatam.
So Adipusha Prabhu is also saying that he's
playing with toys that were dolls of Krishna, even as a child.
Yeah, even as a child. So basically, he grew up in Krishna consciousness, as we call it. So it's not surprising that he probably has heard these pastimes in a nutshell. But what synthesizes it is Sukadeva Goswami nicely summarizes the whole thing in 7 days and gives him the final summary of final goal. Because in that assembly, it said that there are many sages who have assembled, many yogis, jnanis, and all of them are listening. So Sukadeva Goswami finally nicely summarizes the essence of the topic. And that's what it says in the text too. Paramahamsa's devotees who have accepted the essence of life are attached to Krishna in the core of their heart. And he's the main aim of their life. It is their nature to only talk of Krishna at every moment, as if such topics were newer and newer. So basically, I don't think he's talking about that particular pastime. So this line says, it is their nature to talk of Krishna at every moment, as if topics were newer and newer. So I think Sukadeva Goswami saying they're talking about Krishna as if Krishna conscious topics are like newer and newer. That's my limited understanding. Any other comments, points, questions, anything on the chat? I see many comments in the chat. Karatik says, be those who mix with God as honey blends with milk and say, okay, he's quoting from Rumi. So wonderful quote from Rumi. Ananda Manjari saying Sadhu Sangha is like-minded association. And Krishna Daya Prabhu, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu, Name Bhakta Purnashati. So what else? I'm just trying to sort of while time till the darshan opens up.
that shloka, whatever he was quoting, so I just posted Tadeva Ramyam Ruchiram.
Okay, so I'm being told now we're going to do Guru Puja. So thank you so much for your kind attendance. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Lotus feet first. Only way. Alex is lotus feet.
Thank you.
Only wish is to have our consciousness purified by the